Morning, guys, and welcome to the round 14 preview of the NRL with Footy Rants. We're just going to dive straight in here. First game tonight, we got the Sharks up against the Melbourne Storm. So obviously last year's grand finalists and eventual premiers. They've been in some absolute wars over the last couple of years, and then there's been a great rivalry that's developed with those halves combinations and the forward packs, as well as many of them playing representative football both with and against each other over the last few seasons. So I think we both know that there's probably not going to be too much in this regardless, with news coming out late last night that Cooper Cronk will be rested after his origin duties and heavy workload in their big win against Newcastle last week. I think it's a good thing that Bellamy feels comfortable enough to, not want to push the ledger, especially, with players that carry that sort of experience as a Cooper Cronk does. He knows his body probably better than what the staff would know, and I think their relationship would be quite open in the fact and saying that, hey, I need to pull up stumps here. Cam had his week off last week. I'll have mine this week. And I think that's just a testament to the confidence in their structures that they have down there at the Storm. They're not really afraid, for all intents and purposes, coming up against a team like the Sharks, it's top of the table clash. Sorry, mate, we need you. We can potentially have someone on the bench there for you, but we need you to go out there and do your job. So for them to have the faith and confidence in whoever is filling that role, I think that's only putting confidence back into your playing group that's going to be going out there. I think that actually benefits them rather than detracts from them. So we've seen earlier in the year, round 6, the Sharks stole an 18-2 win. They did score a try pretty late in the game there that sort of just blew that open a little bit. Otherwise, it was really, really close for a long time. From memory, I think it was a bit of a wet game down there in Melbourne as well. The Storm have actually won 7 of their last 11 games since 2011 against the Sharks, but funnily enough, the Sharks have had the rub of the green, winning 3 of the last 4. So yeah, we know from those stats that there's not going to be too much in this game, and the interesting selection, we sort of scroll down here to the Melbourne lineup, that Tohu Harris has been named at 7. He's played a little bit of 6 in origin periods previously. He partnered Brodie Croft in his debut against the Dragons last year. So he's definitely not unaccustomed to this halves role. But when you've got someone, if we scroll down a little bit further, we see there Riley Jacks is still in the reserves. It wouldn't surprise me if Slade Griffin finds his way out of the side. Kenny Bromwich just drops back to the bench, Tohu back to his original starting spot, and Jaxie jumps in there at 7. I think that would be the smartest move, in my opinion. If you've got a guy that's already done a job for you for the first quarter of the season as a debutant, why not just put the faith back in there? Especially because Riley Jacks emulates a bit more of a Cooper Cronk with the structure that he brings. Tohu Harris isn't, he's not going to do a bad job for you. I think since coming back and playing in the back row, he hasn't skipped a beat at all. He's been playing very, very well. Especially his probably ball play before and through the line has been very, very promising, and it's opened up a lot of second phase play for the Storm, which allows your blokes like Slater and Cronk to push through and finish the jobs as they've been doing so well. You weigh up a few other options. The Sharks are coming off the bye now, and a lot of their origin stars will be nice and fresh. We see at the top there, so Fafita, Bird, Maloney and Graham all have coming back off origin duty. So off the bye, they're all rested. They didn't need to worry about the stress. Add on top of the fact that the Storm are coming off a short turnaround now, playing on tonight on Thursday. They're all things that weigh up. We all know that for some teams, the bye is a big benefit, and the resting up of those bodies definitely plays in favour. For some, it's a bit of a halter of momentum. And then same goes, I think, because the Melbourne Storm didn't really have to get pushed too much against Newcastle Knights, that definitely plays in their favour on this short turnaround. But the fact that they are missing a Cooper Cronk, I think just the direction and stability that he brings to that side, as well as his combination that we've seen work so well with Billy Slater last week, I think that probably just detracts a little bit more from the game for Melbourne in comparison to losing Cam Smith. We've seen that, it's between Griffin and even Brandon Smith on debut last week, they were able to do an ample job in replacing Cam Smith, and I think the way that the Storm play, it's a lot easier to sort of cover Smith's role, not to detract anything from Smith, obviously. I believe he's a future immortal for sure. He's probably one of the best players ever, in my opinion, just the influence that he has on games and the experience that he brings, and not only that, but obviously the partnership that he's created, not only with Slater and Cronk at Clubland, but also with Jonathan Thurston in Origin. So yeah, I think we're going to be splitting hairs. If I'm going to lean either which way, initially, but before seeing that Cronk was going to be out for this round, I was leaning towards the Storm just to square the ledger. I think it would have painted the narrative quite aptly for a final showdown later in the year if they were going into that third encounter 1-1. However, now that the bodies are rested, and the fact that the Blues came out on top, and that their players in Fafita and Graham played such a heavy influence, and Gallen is no longer playing Origin but is playing out of his skin in club footy, I think that will be enough just to sort of steer me in the direction of the Sharks. But I don't think you can ever really write off the Melbourne Storm. So yeah, I'm gonna tip the Sharks 1-12 in a close one. Just based off the fact that the bodies are a little bit well rested, and should they go with Tohu Harris and Cameron Munster in the halves, I don't think that's going to be the combination that'll get you the win down in Shark Park. Onto our second game, we've got Manly up against Newcastle. Well, after the performance that Newcastle was subjected to last week, it's pretty easy to say, hey, this should just continue on here. Manly got the win against Canberra last week. But, I wasn't so convinced. 38-minute was the last time that they scored a point against Canberra before finally kicking that field goal in the 82nd minute of Golden Point. So that's a little bit concerning for me as coach Trent Barrett. And I don't think you could really knock the effort of Newcastle last week against Melbourne. They just come up against a team that was far, far more skilled, and they executed at a high level. And when you're starved of possession and then you turn over footy like they did, I think it was a just result, a 40-12 scoreline. We can see here that a big loss for them, and a massive point scorer for them in George Tafua has unfortunately succumbed to an ACL injury that won't see him return in 2017. You never like to see those sort of injuries happen to any player, let alone a big Islander, that you just start to wonder how that's going to affect his game and his speed, and the way that he sort of can change his direction late to beat players back on the inside. So, we hope that he makes a full recovery and he's back for Manly next year. But yeah, we've seen Jonathan Wright sort of penciled in to make his first crack with Manly for the year, and Matt Wright has been named at fullback again. However, Tom Trbojevic has been named in the reserves, in the extended bench, so whether he's actually a little bit closer than what is first thought will be interesting. You would think that if that is the case, Matt Wright will probably get his opportunity to play out the rest of the year in the NRL on the wing for Manly. Manly's got an 80% winning record at Brookvale, so that's a big plus. They haven't lost to Newcastle since 2006 at Brookvale, and they haven't actually lost to Newcastle at all since 2012. So they've had a lot of joy against this club. So there are obviously a few little things that play in their favour that bring them confidence, especially with the continued inexperience that is lacking with the Newcastle side. It is slowly getting better. The only way they're going to get experience is to obviously keep putting them out on the field. And there are a number of guys, if we scroll down for Newcastle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players out of that starting 17 that have played every game for them this year. And then you add on, there's probably another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are in double figures as well. So, you got pretty well 12 players that have been there week in, week out for Newcastle. So that's going to lead to results later in the season, in my opinion, as well. Just the pressure that obviously Dane Gagai is under to perform there and pick up the slack. I think it will start to weigh on him eventually, especially coming through this origin period. I really hope that he can sort of keep it together and continue to perform. He's sort of in a similar position to what Tedesco is at the Tigers at the moment, and it's pretty evident in the position that both clubs are at on the ladder, to be honest. But yeah, seeing Tafua miss out like that is going to be a massive blow to Manly and the finishes that he provides. Obviously, being such a big body, you replace that with either a Jonathan Wright, who is a big guy, a tall guy, but obviously doesn't have that stature that a Tafua has, and neither does Matt Wright if Trbojevic does end up playing there. The big areas where I think that they can actually make some ground up, Newcastle, is just this back three here. Sione Matauti is obviously one of the more experienced young kids at Newcastle. Lachlan Fitzgibbon was probably their shining light against the Storm last week. Even though he did end up getting 10 in the bin, I think that was more through effort. You could just see that he wanted to be out there, and then got his reward with a try late in the game. And Mitch Barnett's probably been their staple forward for them for the whole season. So if they can generate some momentum and start to poke holes on the fringes, especially if there is going to be this new sort of lineup. If you've got someone like a Brian Kelly who's gone through his first sort of full season of NRL with the safety and stability of a big body outside him like a George Tafua, and then all of a sudden you throw that spanner in the works and he's got to develop a new relationship. That sort of brings some doubt into that defensive structure for Manly, and that obviously brings some confidence to Newcastle. So that is an area where I think they can really get over the top. But the problem is that attacking potency of your Dylan Walkers and your Brian Kellys. So if they get on a roll and start having their way like they did in that first half against Canberra last week, it'll be a matter of whether they can defend their own line, the Newcastle side. So, I think there's pros and cons either way. I think if those three guys can really stand up for Newcastle and allow their outside backs, we all know that Ken Seo and Nathan Ross can finish, as can Dane Gagai. But they need to lay that platform early, and that obviously was something that just wasn't evident against the Melbourne Storm last week. So I wouldn't write off the Knights. I think a lot of teams are expecting this to be a 13+ victory to Manly, and I'm going to tip Manly in the head-to-head market, but just looking for some sort of value, if there's any value there, just to let you know, the Newcastle side are paying $5.50 1 to 12. So I think Manly were a little bit unconvincing, and it's easy just to jump on the bandwagon and be like, oh yeah, they got flogged last week, they're sort of dust. I don't think the scoreline really. I think it more reflects the experience of the Storm, even without Cameron Smith last week, and the experience of the Newcastle side. But if they can generate a little bit of momentum and defend their line stoutly within that first 20, and weather that attacking Storm, I think that's where they'll have a little bit of joy later in the game. So if they can stay with it and hang tough, you just don't know. The Knights may pull an upset victory in a 1 to 12. So if you're looking for a bit of value and you want a cheeky $50 somewhere, that'd probably be one of the places that I'm at least looking at. The next game, so we got the Broncos and the Rabbitohs is our other Friday night game. Obviously, big ins for the Broncos, Anthony Milford and Cody Nikorima. And I'd like to apologise. Nikorima missed last week due to a shoulder niggle, so he wasn't just absolutely left out. So I gave Wayne Bennett a bit of a hammering earlier, but I just didn't do my research properly. So we see him return this week, and they're two big pluses that we're gonna see for the Broncos. And now that Milford and Ben Hunt can sort of get in their groove again and start to find some of that form that they presented for the club earlier in the season, I think you're going to see a very different performance than what we witnessed against the Roosters last week for those guys. Just having that stability in your halves, and if the forwards get back to their jobs now, so we see that spine sort of return for the Broncos. It's just going to bring the confidence for guys who need to sort of play off the back of that confidence. So your Corey Oates and your James Roberts obviously sort of need that momentum going forward for them to do their jobs off the football properly. When shit's sort of hitting the fan, you can see where they sort of get frustrated, and you know, that's where we see errors creep into the game. Like if we just have a look over here, Corey Oates 15 errors for the season, James Roberts 14 errors for the season, even Moga's up at 12, Kahu 11. So you know, that's a pretty high frequency. Even Milford, you know, see that 17 errors. So that's a lot of errors that, you know, Wayne Bennett will want to be making sure that they cut down on. And I think with Ben Hunt back there, a bit of stability, we'll start to see that for sure. You know, the Bunnies side, you know, they're really struggling at the moment as far as getting any sort of consistency going. They've got strike all across the park, but there's not really going to be too much change in this lineup, which is my biggest concern. We see Bryson Goodwin comes back into the side, which sees Fui Mayono pushed back to the bench, but we see in the reserves there, you've got three experienced guys in Clark, Rocco, and Dave Tyrrell. So you'd expect that there's probably going to be a little bit of change off that bench. I can't see Fui Mayono, Chero, and Zane Musgrove all keeping their spots when you've got that experience there. I think they'll just sort of do a little bit of a numbers count there and just say, look, we're playing the Broncos at Suncorp. We just need some guys who've had some game time under their belt over the years that are going to be able to try and stand the test. I don't think they're under any illusion that they're going to blow the Broncos off the park. They're definitely going to have to grind this win out, and that ultimately is going to come back to holding the football early. If we have a look here, if you go through the errors column for the Rabbitohs, the Burgess brothers, they're through the roof. Tom Burgess 9 errors, George Burgess 4 errors, Sam Burgess 12 errors. So you know, you've got a combined total of 25 errors, and if you compare that to the front row and lock of the Bronx, you know, it compares to 11 between the starting middles for the Broncos. So that's a big concern. If your middles are getting you forward, but they continue to turn the footy over, that leads for a tough day because they're having to continually try and clean up and make up for their mistakes. If they can clean that up and take that out, man, look at the starting side. Like, there's attack and potency across the board. Cody Walker is going to be able to create space. He's going to be a ball-playing fullback for you. He's got electric speed. Alex Johnson, we've seen the speed that he can turn on and score points very quickly on the outside. Bryson Goodwin brings a heap of experience. Aaron Gray's just a ball of muscle. You've seen when John Sutton's on song and his running game's moving forward, how successful they can be. But a big thing that they need to clean up is Adam Reynolds' kicking game. It's, you know, he's renowned for his short kicking game, you know, his long kicking game. He's pretty much got it all. He's probably got one of the most well-rounded kicking games in the NRL. There's not too many that really rival him, apart from Cooper Cronk, to be perfectly honest. So he needs to turn that around. If that's an area of his game that he can flip on his head and that brings him confidence, and we can see, you know, John Sutton start to run, Cody Walker start to run, you've got guys, you know, these big bodies, Burgess, and the form that Crichton's shown in his debut season, that's going to cause headaches because last week, you know, the defensive performance of Adam Blair and Sam Thaiday at times was very much lackluster. We've seen him Thaiday got beaten hands down one-on-one with Joey Manu, and he ran, you know, for 50 plus metres to score the opening try. So they'll need to tidy that up, will the Broncos. So earlier in the year, they did manage a 25-24 win back in round 8. But, you know, if they hold the footy both teams here, they're staring down the barrel of 3 straight losses. They just can't afford that because, the Broncos have got the Raiders in Canberra after the bye. You don't want to be going down to Canberra with three losses in a row. You want some momentum there and just be like, all right, yeah, we've got it. The crew's back. You know what I mean? The spine's back. We can get some continuity. Let's get another win before this whole Origin period ensues again. So yeah, they'll be really looking to turn that around, and yeah, just things can't really get too much worse for the Bunnies. That we've seen the sprays that they've been copping from Maguire post game against the Raiders, against Para, I think it was. They didn't even really get flogged. I think they only lost by 6 points. A couple of late tries to Alex Johnson really made things interesting. But it's like, why are we letting that happen? Why are we taking to the last few minutes of a game to actually be competitive? So, the stats sort of say that the Broncos should go on and win it. They're back in front of a home crowd. The spine's back. There's no real excuses now. The time is now to go forth and destroy, essentially. So if the Broncos can find their mojo, and they can create some space and opportunities for blokes like Roberts and finishing opportunities for Oates. If they can hold their shape for Darius Boyd, there's room for him to either finish well on that right side or score himself if he gets his running game going. But yeah, it's ultimately going to come down to completions, I think. Whichever side respects the footy a little bit more, which neither side have done really in recent times. That's going to be a big dictator, as it is inevitably in any game of rugby league, to be honest. Moving forward onto our first game of Super Saturday, we've got the Gold Coast Titans up against the New Zealand Warriors. There's been some epic battles. We see here that the Titans are $1.73 favourites, New Zealand $2.15 outsiders at the moment. Jared Hayne has been named at fullback. Copley keeps his spot, moving into the centres from the wing, and Will Zillman moves into the starting side on the wing. Another big plus for those guys is Nathan Peets after being rested after Origin, copping that cork. So that leaves Tyrone Roberts moved back to the bench. So you can see that bench there. Carl Lawton still remains on that at the moment. For me, I would be very surprised if they left 2 smaller guys on the bench in Carl Lawton and Tyrone Roberts. Whilst Carl Lawton, he's not the smallest 9 you're ever going to find. But for me, I would rather just bring... Look, we've got down here Ignatius Parsi, Petteroo, and Pettyborn. All big boys that can more than stand up to a New Zealand forward pack. They've come off the back of a couple of disappointing losses, the Gold Coast Titans. For all intents and purposes, probably should have gone up there. And what I thought they would have got the cookies against the Cowboys, but didn't do so. And prior to the bye, were absolutely pumped by Manly down at Brookvale. So, after showing a spate of good form against some of the top teams like the Storm and the Sharks, they've definitely performed below par over the last couple of weeks now. So they'll want to leverage this game and play themselves into some form. And I guess the worrying sign for New Zealand is really the only change for them is James Gabbett. So he's out with a hamstring injury, which sees Lilliman and Madalino start, and Bunny Afoa comes back onto the bench. So I don't know what you sort of think as a Warriors fan. You're like, okay, well, there's all these changes that are happening with the Gold Coast team, and we've actually experienced a lot of success. So the Warriors have won 12 of the last 13 games against the Titans. They've won their past 6 at Robina, so on the Gold Coast, but they haven't won in Australia this season. I thought they were going to get it done last week, but they just never really... they started building their opportunities after a poor start, but then they just couldn't continue on with it. And obviously a big momentum shift was when Sean Johnson tossed up that dog shit play where he didn't get a foot to the ball, and Radradra ends up going the length, and that was a big shift. Once it dotted out to 18-12, it really sort of opened the game up a little while, and they really struggled because they stopped going away from the attacking raids against Mitchell Moses, and as soon as they got back there, they scored points again. We've seen it in the podcast earlier in the week that it was Simon Mannering who actually was ball playing to set Hoffman up for that final Warriors try. So, you know, again, you say it week in, week out. If you've got blokes like Lasone, Vete, and Afoa coming off the bench, like that's so much strike power, and you've got the experience of Mannering, Hoffman, Madalino, and Lillyman. Not to mention, you know, you've got the New Zealand spine. I'm saying the same things. It's echo here. On paper, you say these guys go over and do a job, but you know, even on top of that, I thought that these guys would have gone over with the side that they had and do a job on an understrength Cowboys side, and they didn't. So there's a lot of momentum to be turned around for either side. If whoever loses this game, making the top 8 becomes so much harder now. You know, this is round 14, so we're over the halfway point for the season now. You're 3 wins out of the 8 if you lose this weekend. So it's really going to start to shift the momentum towards not making the 8, whoever loses this game. And I know I'm probably a silly bloke in in putting my chips in the Warriors basket on a 50-50 call, but I think I'm gonna lean towards the Warriors in a 1-12, just simply because it's one, they've got a good winning record against the Titans, and two, that 0-8 performance in Australia so far this season, it's got to break at some point. So why not do it now? I know Conrad Harrell will probably be up for a big game against his former club. He did score in their last outing against each other. But yeah, I don't really have too much. I think this is another knife's edge game. It could go either way. It was pretty similar as the Warriors were against Parramatta last week. A lot of the stats and stuff like that, they match up pretty evenly. And their performance and in place on the ladder are pretty well identical. So again, it's going to come down to who wants it more, who executes better. The battle of the halves between LG Taylor, Four, and Johnson is something that excites me. It's a fast flowing style game. I hope that we really see that. I hope we're privy to some great attacking tries, because these two clubs are renowned for that. You know, their attacking prowess when shit comes off, they score some really entertaining tries. Having Pete's back there to steer the ship is obviously a massive plus for them. But yeah, it's nothing other than just looking at the odds. You know, for me, for the Warriors, it's do or die. A lot of the times they probably die. So yeah, I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is, and I'm gonna lean towards the Warriors in I guess, well, it is an upset from what the bookies tell us. So yeah, I'm going for a Warriors upset. Panthers Raiders, yeah, this should be a really interesting game. They often turn on really entertaining games. We see now that the Penrith side is starting to find their mojo. Matt Moylan's move to 6 was obviously a very successful decision. Dylan Edwards, again, echoing what I said in the review earlier in the week, didn't disappoint. His carries were phenomenal. I think he ended up with something around 17 touches of the footy, which is what you want from a fullback, especially a young dude. You don't want to see any signs of nerves. You want to see him pull up his socks, bite down on his mouth guard, and get to work, and that's exactly what he did. Mitch Rain obviously holds his place while the injured Peter Wallace comes out, and to be honest, if he continues with the form that he started with in his first game for the club, you know, Anthony Griffin's gonna have a bit of a decision on his hands, and the fact that he was the coach who actually showed Wallace the door at the Bronx, don't be surprised if he leans towards Mitch Rain now that he's got an excuse to keep him there, especially if they don't lose. You know, that there's every reason to attribute some of that form to his performance. So a big loss for the Raiders. We see Dynamis Louis out for the season with an ACL injury, but a bigger loss for the short term is Shannon Boyd. So that sort of affects their starting lineup in the middle. So Soliola's been pushed to the front row, and Luke Bateman comes off the bench and will play lock. So they're your middles. So a little bit of change for the Raiders. Otherwise, we see a debutant in Royce Hunt come off the bench for the Raiders. So I've done a little bit of digging around. The young kid is from, I hope I pronounce this correctly, Willagee in Perth. I'd say it's Willagee. Came through, got picked up by the Dogs as a kid, played NYC there for a few years, played Australian schoolboys, and then wasn't re-signed after 20s with the Dogs and landed a contract with the Mounties exclusively, so played for them last year, and then off the back of his performances ended up with a full-time contract with the Raiders NRL team this year. So, it's good to see kids stick it out and be willing to, come out the back of that 20 system, get involved and thrive once they start playing senior footy against men. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he goes. He looks like a big thing. Hopefully he gets some minutes. I think, I think Bateman, even though he's been coming off the bench, he definitely doesn't look unaccustomed to be able to play some minutes for you, and I think he'll do a job. So it'll be interesting to see what sort of opportunities he does get, if he does get any opportunity at all. Clydesdale, Priest, and Tarpanay, we can see there they've all played most of the games this season. So as have most of the starting side. You can see there everyone is in double figures, bar Hunt who's coming off the bench. So depending on the way the game plays out, they may look to those 16 men to just do the job for them. But when I see guys get an opportunity to debut and they don't get a start, it sort of gives me the shits a little bit, because you got to think it knocks their confidence to a certain degree. But getting back to the Penrith outfit, just the fact that they're hitting their straps now, I think we could really be in for a period of time where we really start to see the true potential of this team play out. And that's something that scares me as a Raiders fan, player, coach, whatever position you want to be in. And the fact that, your ability to get back in the game last week against Manly was hinged off a winger. That's what concerns me. It's great to have those players with that attacking prowess who can flip a game at the drop of a hat, but it shouldn't be coming from a fucking winger. There needs to be more leadership and direction being taken by, not only your halves, your spine, but a genuine go forward prop. And they developed a little bit of that, but the fact that the key plays came straight directly off the back of Jordan Rapana is something that concerns me. So if you're looking for a little bit of value here, this is getting back to the betting markets. Panthers 13 plus $4, I think is really good value. That's only 2 and a bit tries that they've got to eke out, and the fact that they've scored, what have they scored now? I think 92 points, maybe better. I think it might even be 98 points in their last 3 outings. So they're getting across the line. They're really getting across the line, and I know you can never discount a side because Jordan Rapana's in it and Leilua's in it, and that edge combination that they've developed, and the fact that we alluded to the game plan of Manly last week, trying to overwork that edge so that they weren't as potent in attack. It didn't even work. They did double the amount of defense and still scored all the points from that side. So, we've seen now that they've been tested out and will stand that test. So it's going to be more of a holistic performance. The kicking game of Cleary, I think, is going to play a massive role for Penrith. And as these relationships begin to develop with Mansour back in the fray and Edwards out the back, I think it's only going to get better. The fact that they put together a 38-0 win against a dog side who, yes, haven't been in form and are missing some of their stars. Regardless, that doesn't take away the performance of your key players in the forwards, like Campbell Gillard, Harawira-Naia, Isaiah Yeo, and Trent Merrin. So, yeah, I'm going to tip Penrith, and I'm going to tip them to win at least 13 plus. Yeah, I don't think they'll blow them off the park like they did to the Bulldogs last week. But the fact that it sort of took so long for the Raiders to get into the game, and that it was Jordan Rapana who basically single-handedly got them back into the game, I don't think that's going to be a strategy that you want to take against a confident Penrith side. Alrighty, into the next game. This is going to be a really interesting one. Parramatta Eels versus the North Queensland Cowboys. We see there that North Queensland are $1.85 favourites with Parramatta $2 outsiders. So that's, just shows that Cowboys have actually generated a little bit of respect due to their gutsy win against Gold Coast last week. But I think, to be honest, a lot of this comes down to where this game's being played. The favouritism there. So it's being played in Darwin. You would assume that the Cowboys are going to have a lot more support there than the Parramatta Eels were, despite it being an Eels home game. So for that reason, I think that's why the markets are probably just favouring North Queensland. We see both sides have named their halves in extended benches. So Corey Norman and Jonathan Thurston have been named in extended benches. Whether they play or not, I think Thurston is highly, highly unlikely. There was no hint that he would be playing from Paul Green in the press conferences earlier in the week. But if we scroll further down, we see that young Kyle Labert will make his NRL debut in the absence of Ray Thompson, who's succumbed to that degenerative knee injury that they continue to flare up, and he has to modify his training constantly to do so, unfortunately. So yeah, the young kid will get his crack, and perhaps here we're getting a little bit of a taste of the future Cowboys halves pairing once Jonathan Thurston does hang those boots up in a couple of years. From what I've seen, the young fella came through the 20s system, a very successful 20s program, experienced a lot of finals football, and has since played Queensland residents this year after his performances throughout. One thing that does impress me and fill me with confidence is his defence. He's much like Morgan, isn't a tiny body, He's not a midget by any stretch of the imagination, and he's not afraid to get his body in front. And I've seen him put a few big boys on their back in his time in that Queensland Cup level already. So that's something that I think he will eat up, especially defending with the likes of an Ethan Lowe and a Cohen Hess. That will definitely fill him with confidence. So I don't think it's something that will be concerning Paul Green too much. And the fact that, again, alluding back to their performance last week, probably, I think they were favourites at home. I was confused as to why, especially with the side that the Titans were putting together and the confidence that a few of those players were going to experience post-Origin. But they managed to nut out a win. Again, it wasn't what I would consider satisfactory considering the amount of ball that they had. It took them 20 minutes to get over the line, so that's obviously a big concern. But who knows? There may be some attacking flair that Labert brings to the system now that they can finish with. Justin O'Neill's back in. And I hope for his sake that he gets on a bit of a roll and starts to develop that confidence, because no doubt he probably would have been trying to stay away from the papers the last couple of weeks after his Origin performance, and that unfortunate time where he dropped the ball and they scored straight away. But I think the advice that he'd be getting from his mates and from coaches is you got to put that behind you and put your best foot forward, because no doubt he's probably anticipating that he won't be around for game 2. So it's up to him to stand up and put on a display that at least shows some sort of redemptive qualities. The big concern for me, and I think what will determine which way I lean in the outcome of this game, is the selection around the halves and Clint Gutherson. If Norman does play this week, and this decision is going to have to be made regardless at some point once Norman does come back. Realistically, the only reason Mitchell Moses slotted straight into that starting side wasn't because he was a mid-season transfer and they paid all this money for him and automatically that means you start. It was because Corey Norman was injured, so it just made sense. Yeah, sweet, we go with that. But Gutherson has been their best player the whole year. I know Norman has played some outstanding games as well and gets him on the front foot, and especially when his running game's on, they're really on as a team. But overall, I think Gutherson has been the more consistent player. Obviously, he's had more opportunities to prove that with Norman being out injured. And I think the time that Norman has been absent, has probably played more into the hands of his being selected. If I'm the coach, I know it's a tough decision, but I think if I'm trying to think from a team perspective, if I'm a player within that side and I drop Clint Gutherson or even push him to the wing, we can see there that Nathan Davis will play his first game for Parramatta since moving from the Gold Coast. I think that a few players would be like, oh, it's good to still see Gutho in the team even though he's on the wing, but I think a lot of players wouldn't really think that's the best call. And I think it would teach Mitchell Moses a lot about the respect that needs to be earned at Parramatta, and I think long term for their principles, that it's only going to make Mitchell Moses a better player. Well, I would like to think that anyway. If he did end up getting dropped, if he went back and kicked cans and didn't perform at New South Wales Cup, that would be sort of alarm bells for me as a coach in Brad Arthur. So, if Norman does come back, I would be inclined either, if you really wanted to keep Mitchell Moses in and you've been prepared to name Will Smith on the bench, Mitchell Moses would just go back to the bench and you could use him in some sort of utility role later in the match if you wanted to do so. But if I'm thinking about the team that I'm playing in the Cowboys, we know big forward pack, even despite missing a number of forwards in Matt Scott, Pat Kafusi and the like, I would want to be bringing on my powerhouse, and that's Vave. I would drop Smith off the back of that bench and put Vave in there, especially if Norman doesn't play. I would much rather go 4 bigger bodies and really have a crack, because you're going to get good minutes out of Kaiser Pritchard, but I guess with him having succumbed to a few little niggling injuries and head knocks and stuff over the last couple of weeks, that's probably why Brad Arthur's leaning towards having at least someone that could fill the role. But if you've got guys like Gutherson, Takarangi, that they can they're Mr. Fix-Its, they're going to be around. But yeah, if these guys here in Manu Mau, Maroa and Brown, who played 80 minutes last week, can stand up and lay a big platform, that's going to go a long way into bending the backs of the Cowboys, and will really put their attacking structure under stress. If they can force the Cowboys to have to defend and really if they have to play from behind, I don't think the Cowboys are going to be too successful on the night. So I think it's really important that the Cowboys get off to an extremely strong start. So yeah, my decision basically hinges around this selection process of Mitchell Moses. If Norman doesn't play and Mitchell Moses stays there, just based off the fact of his terrible fucking defensive performances throughout his career, but more importantly this year, I just can't see Gavin Cooper not scoring at some point. So again, getting back to those betting markets, anytime try scorer Gavin Cooper, $4.50. So $4.50 to score at any point during the game. If Mitchell Moses is out there, Gavin Cooper, even without Thurston, who obviously creates a lot of that room, good luck. I reckon he's a massive chance of getting over the line. So some good value there. So yeah, if they go with that decision, if Mitchell Moses and Gutherson are the starting halves, despite pulling one over the Warriors, this is a different team. It's a different beast. You're playing the Cowboys. It's not really going to feel like a home game for you up there. There's going to be more support, just a few more variables to overcome, and I think that the Cowboys could prevail with Labour on debut by a 1-12 margin. But if Normie is in there and it's Gutho and Normie, like, look out. You've seen some of the interviews that they've had on the media. They very much look like very good mates, very close mates, and socialise a lot together. And I think that goes a long way for a cohesiveness of a halves pairing. It makes the game so much easier if you're playing with genuine mates. So, that's some danger signs for the Cowboys if Norman and Gutherson are back. Alrighty, we're into Sunday's games now. We see the Tigers up against the Roosters. You look at it for what it is, and it should be an absolute bloodbath. The Roosters should really bounce back now that that they're getting Mitchell Pearce back. We can see that Mitchell Pearce is back in the fray. But for the Tigers, just now that they've lost the experience of Chris Lawrence, he was him and Elijah Taylor were just sort of at least holding some sort of glue in the middle, and that's where they sort of had their success against the Dragons last week. They were riding the game, and will probably consider themselves a little unlucky not to get the win. But nevertheless, the fact that Tedesco and Aaron Woods are going to have to steer this ship again. I just look at that forward pack. Sia Manafanai, Suaso Su, love it. Elijah Taylor, like it's not something that overly intimidates me if I'm looking at the forward pack of the Roosters. Waria Hargraves, Napa, Cordner, Orbison, Takeaho. That just brings so much more potency, especially when they execute, and just the outside men as well. Gordon, Tupou, Mitchell, Manu, Ferguson. The running game, halves, Kiri, Pierce. Like it's just such a strong team. This team, if they fire at the right time and stay fit, they're going to go a long, long way to winning this competition. I really think that the Roosters can win the comp this year with the side that they have. Gallantry and grittiness can only get you so far when you've got the team that the Tigers currently do, and the adversity that they've had to attempt to overcome, and it just really hasn't been working for them at the moment. And, I'd love to see them go out there and get an upset win and build some confidence, especially around this Origin time, and to say, hey, look, we overcame this team that's absolutely stacked with Origin stars. But I think just the sheer experience and potency that the Roosters side possesses, there's not really much for me to talk on in this game. I think it's going to be a Roosters 13 plus. Anthony Tupou to score 2 tries and more is paying $4.50. I think there's some good value there. He's a great finisher. We've seen what that left edge did to Parramatta a few weeks ago in that, I think it was a 48-10 drubbing. So they'll want to continue to build some momentum now. They broke that little losing streak that they had against the Broncos last week. They've got a bye next week, so they want to tick that box. 2 wins and a bye, plenty of momentum, because then they're into the Storm and Sharks after the bye. So they're really going to get a strong gauge of where they're at. And we've seen earlier in the season, off the back of some good form, came up against Broncos who were in form, got absolutely pasted, but then have since come back, return serve, even despite missing Pierce and the fact that they were missing Milford. I thought it was pretty well, a fair contest. And they went out and did their job. So, yeah, for me, it's Roosters 13 plus. I think it'll be a bit of a routine job. I don't think that you'll see a Rooster side like that underperform like the Dragons did last week. Into the final game, we've got the Bulldogs versus the Dragons. Massive pluses for the Bulldogs this week. I don't think you can even really take into too much consideration the performance of the 38-0 loss to Penrith last week. And we actually seen last time they got spanked by Manly earlier in the year, they actually came out, and that's when they got their win against Canberra. So, if we want to go back to some sort of form around getting flogged, they normally return serve pretty well. There's been a few changes, so Morris comes back after missing out from Origin the other week. So that sees Branko Lee get dropped, and Chase Stanley's into the lineup, and Montoya holds his spot with Holland getting the back door. So a little bit of change on the edges there. We've all seen what Chase Stanley can produce over the years, and I don't think he'll take a backward step. And the big pluses, the heart and soul of this club, in my opinion, Josh Reynolds, James Graham, back on board. So what that does for the other players, and now that we see the hothead of Craig Garvey, who didn't really offer too much, in my opinion, in his time in the top grade, it brings back that combination that we've seen the Dogs start to get that rolling on. So Matt Frawley's been named on the bench, so he'll come on, bring that stability with the kicking game and start to build some pressure there. Cassiano can now go back off the bench and just come back on with a bit more punch, a bit more oomph. Fualo and Eastwood, how Eastwood still keeps getting a run is beyond me. Surely there's some depth somewhere down there that boys could get on. Francis Tuilau, he's a big body. You'd think he'd get a crack. Adam Elliott and Josh Jackson can definitely more than withstand 80 minutes of NRL football now. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I think it's a completely different side. The fact that the Dogs are $2.65 outsiders, I think is big value, especially because there's no changes really to this Dragons side, who well and truly underperformed. You know, you can't really say, oh, it was just because it took a little bit of time for Gareth Widdop to find his feet, because he was their best fucking player. Without him, they don't win. So, you know, I was a little bit confused. I know it's good to see Frizzell hasn't really sustained anything long term after going off with that rib injury on the weekend. So, you know, they've definitely got the forward pack. It's going to be, I think that's where everything's going to be sorted out in that first 20 to 25 minutes. Whoever can get that ascendancy there. But with James Graham back and the doggedness of Reynolds, that's what excites me most about this Bulldogs team. And I don't think they're going to go out there and blow the Dragons off the park. But the fact that the Dragons were a little unconvincing last week, I don't think you'll see it from them again. But now that they're coming up against a tougher opposition, guys that are coming back, that's only going to bring confidence to the other players around it. It's something about when you have players who you know bring value to your side, they bring value to you personally as a player. So when you're playing week to week, it's hard not to be like, oh, it's so hard. Like, I'm just not used to having. You don't realize what impact those players have when they're not around. So that brings confidence to me as a player if I know that I've got good players coming back in. You know, it knows that I've got someone who can rev me up and take me to the next level. And I think that's definitely what guys like Reynolds and James Graham do, because they lead by example. They do things outside of their scope, outside of their responsibility, their playing role responsibility. And I think you'll see a lot of guys follow suit, and that's only going to benefit the game of someone like a Will Hopewade and the Morris brothers, who have got a ton of fucking experience now. So Adam Elliott, again, I preached his performance last week in a dismal performance from his team, and I think he'll continue to do that. I don't think you'll see Clemmer put together a bad performance again like he did last week. He was a bit quiet after a successful Origin campaign, so expect him to bounce back and really try and assert some authority over Russell Packer. I'm really keen to see them go at it. So yeah, I'm going to tip a Dogs upset here, 1-12. They're paying $3.75. Somewhere where they may lack a little bit, you know, losing Holland and that goal kicking ability. So I assume Mbai picks that responsibility up, and he's been a bit up and down. So, you know, if it is a close one, who knows? You know, the sharp boot of Widdop may kick them home. So, but either way, I think it's going to be close to 1-12. So, yeah, that's everything. Round 14 leading into that. You know, I hope you've enjoyed that. If there's any questions, anything you want to pose, anything, you know, even if there's anything that you want me to talk about during the week, if there's some stuff you'd like me to touch on, I'm more than willing to get some feedback and potentially just sneak some cheeky little podcasts in during the week. Otherwise, yeah, still thoroughly enjoying the process, and I'll continue doing what I'm doing. Righty, gang. Thanks for your support, and Rants out.